Okay, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here today. My name is Melissa Singranis, and I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Family Care of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. And we're really excited about this topic today with George, Papa George. Before I introduce him, there's just a few housekeeping notes that I want to go over. Just if you notice at the top of your left, the left-hand side of your screen, there's a blue box with a question mark on that. If you click on that, that will enable you to type in questions, and George will receive those questions. And he asks that you ask questions throughout the presentation, and he'll try to address them the best that he can, depending how many questions he gets. The other thing is that this is being recorded. So you all will be able to watch it later at another time if you want, or you can forward it to other people who weren't able to be here today to watch. We will probably put it up about a week afterwards, and if you're with us on Facebook or on our email listserv, you'll get notification when it does go up. So we welcome today George Papa George. George is a licensed marriage and family therapist who's been working with couples, teenagers, and families for the past 25 years. He's involved with the San Francisco Metropolis Family Wellness Center, and he speaks at various Orthodox churches throughout the San Francisco metropolis about family wellness and other topics around family life. He and his wife have two beautiful children, and we are so excited to have you here today with us, George. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Great. Thanks, Melissa. I'm delighted to be with you guys. I'm definitely excited whenever, like this whole thing, what we're doing today, we're kind of rallying around a topic that we have in common in some way. We're raising boys, we're raising our kids. Right there, in my own way, I just press a little pause button to say what we're spend a few minutes on together today is super important to all of us. So I hope to get at a couple of topics that I have found to be, vital, crucial topics. I come before you. Yep, been in my counseling practice for some years now, but also been a dad for some years now, and so kind of on-the-job training, whether that's professionally or personally. The topics we're covering today are right at the center of what's really important to me. As Melissa mentioned. We are out here in California. My wife Kim, luckily doing probably most of the heavy work when it comes to the parenting, but definitely trying to even get clear on my role as a dad as we go. And then our two kids, Olivia, and I want to sneak it in here, Olivia and Petros. There's Olivia, just turned 16, and Petros, there they are. Kiss them, give them a kiss. Okay, I know it's cheesy. Anyway, I actually like to have their pictures around when I speak, and I speak in all the public schools around here. I like to have them actually nearby in picture form, just to keep me connected to the kind of heartfelt nature of what we're talking about. So today we are talking about raising sons and understanding the inner life of boys, and that subtitle, understanding the inner life of boys, is very much what we're after. Now, there's a lot of things we could talk about in raising sons. In a way, I'd say the most important part, and the part that's skipped over the most, is their inner life. These active boys keep us busy kind of in the outer life, in so much activity, and all of that is great. And very often they aren't the kids that are going to come up and say, I want to share my feelings. So if we're not getting the memo on this, we may actually almost forget that we're supposed to actually try to crack the code and get in on what's going on in their inner life, and how do we reach them? How do we understand them? So what I want to start us with today, and definitely you keep your sons in mind. Maybe their pictures are nearby where you're sitting. I hope so, actually, because I want to get the sort of the energy going that as we're chatting and as I'm presenting and as you're sending me questions, that I want to for you to keep your sons in mind and what's pertinent to you. But I want to start us off with what I'd say is the top 10 things we need to know, and some of you may have printed out the handout, this would be one of the handouts, the top 10 things you need to know. And so as I share these, again, let's keep our own boys in mind. So number 10 of the top 10 things we need to know if we're ever going to get the job right on raising our boys. Number 10, boys utilize the blank of blank to feel alive and masculine. Boys utilize blank of blank to feel alive and masculine. Now you might, again, I want you to kind of let your wheels turn. What are we getting at here? Boys utilize the testing of limits to feel alive and masculine. So right off the bat on number 10, I want us to be thinking about this, because even, and again, we're going to jump into the actual content and the notes on the other handout, but I want this to start cultivating a soil. I want this to start getting us kind of in the mode of what kinds of things are we needing to understand about boys. And in the job of parenting, and I find lots of moms coming my way on this point alone, because very often they're in the day in, day out, every minute, every limit getting tested so often. So I want to make this point from the outset that I want us to have a proper understanding of even what does it mean when a child tests the limit. We tend, from a parental perspective, we tend to view it as things that are negative in nature. We tend to view testing of limits as they're not going with the program, they're making it harder, they're slowing us down, they're even defiant, or oh, they're rebelling, or oh, there they go again. And there could be sort of truth to all of that, except that if we don't understand what testing of limits means to them, we may project out into space of all that it means to us and all the reactions that go with it, not realizing that when a boy tests a limit, it's like flexing a muscle. When a boy tests the limit, he is testing out not only sort of the buzz they get from feeling a little bit alive, but that their masculinity is being developed during these same occurrences, during these same years. And depending on what goes on around the testing of that limit, has some say on how alive they'll feel and how masculine they're going to end up feeling. So I want us to keep that in mind. Now, I want to clarify, I'm not saying because it's connected to these important things, we let them test limits in a way where they own the home and get whatever they want. I'm saying emotionally, I want us to understand when they're testing a limit, they're actually sort of doing some pushing that builds muscle that they need. Commonly, as I alluded to, we tend to process it in only negative ways, or even in the in responding in negative ways. So we process in negative ways, like the cardinal sin of parenting is personalizing. So if we're personalizing, oh, they're testing that limit, look what they're doing to me. If we personalize it, we've already set our parenting response sort of off center. If we take it both psychologically and spiritually, we could say we went into the ego. We went into the personalizing, uh-oh, I'm making it about me somehow. So I want us to keep in mind that as they test limits, we're keeping number 10 in mind, that it may not be about us. It may, in fact, be about them needing to figure out what's real, what's not, and how can they get in touch with that limit line, that boundary line. Okay, and we may get back to that. Certainly, I want you to feel free to send me questions in that arena if you feel led, because I think there's a lot that can be discussed in the area of testing limits. But number 10, boys utilize the testing of limits to feel alive and masculine. Number 9, boys possess invisible blank blank and use them often. So number 9 is boys possess invisible mute buttons and use them often. If your boy is at least 3 years old, you know already their ability to glaze over and they see your lips moving and they've already tuned you out. So boys are very skilled at finding that button. Number 8, boys have a blank or blank response to conflict. Ideas? I know you're thinking of it. Boys have a fight or flight response to conflict. So we keep that in mind because boys are a lot like who they grow up to be, which is us men. Men are known as well to typically have a fight or flight response to conflict. Number 7, boys' number one belief about women is that they blank, 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 blank. Boys' number one belief about women, of course, is based on their moms and their sisters. That's the training ground. Boys' number one belief about women is that they use too many words. Alrighty. Number 6, boys have 2 4-letter words for love. If we were to forget everything we talked about together and we remembered this part, we'd come out ahead. Boys have 2 4-letter words for love. Time and play. The use of, or their experience with our time, their experience with playfulness with us is absolutely pure form of love in the life of a boy. Number 5 of our top 10, boys have one main emotional response for nearly all of their negative emotions. So think of the whole array of negative emotions a person can have. Boys typically have one main emotional response, no matter what variation of negative emotion they may have. The one emotional response is, yep, anger. Anger. Number 4, boys need blank in most areas of their life. What are we thinking? Boys need blank. This one, as we're thinking about it, we're going to get into at least my mindset on my outlook on all this. This is another main point in just getting a sense of what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we experience it as parents. Number 4, boys need training in most areas of their life. Number 3, boys emotionally need blank from the grown-ups in their life, but often trigger blank from most grown-ups in their life. And as you're thinking about it, you may be coming up with answers slightly different than mine, which is fine. It still could be fitting the idea here. Boys emotionally need tenderness from the grown-ups in their life, but often trigger harshness from most grown-ups in their life. Boys are prone, number 2, boys are prone to having blank personalities. Or you could take me literally, maybe I'm saying blank personalities. No, there's a blank there. What kind of personalities are boys prone to having? Lots of different ways to answer it. I would say my central view of this would be boys are prone to having addictive personalities. And number 1, boys are worth it. Boys are worth it because, what could it be? I'm going to bring up my favorite picture of my son. Boys are worth it because they're so darn cute. Alrighty, there we go. So again, I want us to stay sort of emotionally connected to keep this with our boys, to keep this all in perspective, because frustrations can run high in the raising of sons. So I've mentioned a few things, and I do have a question that has come in, and I want to respond to it, and then we could roll right into more questions as well as some of the content I want to get at. The question is, what is the proper response to an instance of testing the limits? So it's a great question, and since they're going to be doing it a lot, and since when they're doing it, we've connected it to they're flexing, they want to feel alive. Keep in mind, too, that the testing of limits, it's going to be happening all through the years. 2 super high season periods of time, like when it's going to happen a lot, is in toddlerhood, and of course we know in adolescence. In toddlerhood, it is the first time an infant actually perceives themselves when becoming a toddler. They go from infancy to toddlerhood. They actually perceive themselves as something other than extension of their mother. So toddlerhood is, wow, I'm my own person. Look how exciting this is. Let me climb the refrigerator. Let me pick out clothes that embarrass my parents. Let me do things because I can. Okay? Adolescence, known as the second toddlerhood, is the time when children, when hitting adolescence, and what we know, if any of you have 9, 10, 11-year-olds, pre-adolescence, now known as the new adolescence, since 50 is the new 40, or 40 is the, yeah, 50 is new 40, I think 9 is the new 15, but so all the numbers are scrambling on us, but the second toddlerhood, a child is saying, wow, I'm not just an extension of my family. And what do? Wow, I feel alive. I do it on my own. I sort of want to go underground, test all limits. So we see that there's years of time throughout childhood where the testing of limits is going on. And again, for all these sort of alive reasons. Now, we know that children don't have all the maturity, all have the decision-making skills, and so they're going to be testing limits that we're going to want to do something about, right? So getting back to the question of what's our proper response, one of the ways I'd say it is, so first of all, I'd say when they test the limit, and I alluded to it earlier, the more we emotionally react, we just lost a teaching opportunity, because every time they test the limit, it is a teaching opportunity of what line they just crossed. Did they cross a line abusing time, i.e. the PS3, PS4, Xbox? Did they just use time in a way that wasn't considerate? Did they misuse words? Did they misuse their fist? Did they misuse responsibility and privilege? So just to finish my point on, so testing the limits, definitely, it's not about how we feel about the fact that it happened. It's about some teaching of, like as I mentioned, oh, this part isn't okay. If we talk in all or nothings, kids are dying to talk in all or nothings. That's why they have such big reactions. And so, as we're responding, we've got to break it down into parts of, this part was great. I love that you're enthusiastic to want to play with your friends, for 4 hours overtime. We love that you love to play, but the 4 hours overtime wasn't okay, and here's the consequence. But I'm glad you're a playful kid. I'm glad you're so fun. I'm glad you're so well liked. See, here's the parts we value. Ooh, this part went over the line. See that line part? That's the boundary. Clarifying what went over the line. Okay? All right. Another question came in. I feel they want to see us angry. Is this true? But it's another great question. I do think that they want to see what happens when they test the limit. It could be that we get angry when they test the limit. So I'm not sure if they actually want us to see us angry. I do think they get a little buzz of power when they get that much from us. Because when we get angry, like we overreact, talk about pumping iron, they just built their muscles like crazy. That was like a power surge. Unfortunately, if we get angry, they get hooked on feeling like, ooh, I like the power, and they actually start liking the power. So I think our anger is this indirect, unfortunate way that we have inadvertently trained them to feel alive and masculine. I think there's more constructive ways, like time and play, that could really help, and to meet them where they're at and instruct at the points at which they test the limit. All right, so let's roll right into, and I left my office door open in the move here. Hold on one sec. Sorry about that. I had lost you there for a while, so it's good to have you guys back. All right. Let's let's say a couple things. In fact, okay, yeah. Let's say a couple things about. Um, well, let me say on the top 10, I do want all of you to look at any of those top 10 that you think are for you. Something on that top 10, I think, is meant to say, "Oop, pay attention to this point or that point." Now, rolling right into kind of point 2. Now we're on the regular part of the outline, understanding emotional development. Um, I do want us to keep in mind that just like what we understand about physical development, what happens early in stages of physical development shows up in later stages of physical development. So malnourishment in early stages of physical development will have stunting of growth in areas, or a breakdown in immunity system in later stages. Same is true. I want us to have that appreciation about emotional development, that what happens in earlier stages shows up in later stages. So injury in early stages, unmet needs in early stages, shows up in our kids' lives emotionally somewhere in a later stage. I also want to mention that if there's one thing as we kind of launch into the coming points, and we're going to get the bulk of the topic here, I also want us to keep in mind a couple things. One is, and this is kind of leave it to somebody that's in the field of psychology to kind of psychoanalyze a little bit. But here's my kind of deep point here. When we talk about what shows up in their emotional development, and I said a minute ago, unmet needs will kind of show up. For instance, toddlers that are overprotected and hovered over too much actually creates boys that will have low confidence later. So as much as we go, ooh, we like how it's going, we like how they're staying within the lines all the time, what ends up happening in the later stage is the need they had was to figure out the lines and to flex a little, and later they have low creativity, low confidence, because the takeaway they have is, it wasn't that, oh, mommy loved me and did it for me, it's that I wasn't good enough to do it, and that's why mommy did it for me all the time. So we want to keep that in mind. What happens early shows up later. But the other point, my little psychoanalysis point I wanted to make is, unfinished business we have, and I hate to do this to us, but it just is how it is. Unfinished business we have from our own childhood or in our own emotional lives, that will spill into the raising of our kids and will show up in one way or another in the emotional life of our boys. And so I want us to keep that in check, that like the job of parenting is its own kind of hard work. What comes up for us emotionally usually is our emotional issues. I want us to keep this in mind and be doing whatever we need to do to tend to that and to get those needs met and figured out. Okay. So here we're kind of tuning in. The other point I wanted to make about, and this hopefully is a takeaway, is the what I call the property value principle. Out here in California, property value is going crazy again. And any expert in real estate tells you there's 3 principles in real estate, right, that gives you the high value, but also helps you maintain value during tough times. We know the 3. Any experts out there? Location, location, location. Well, in raising boys, this is a crucial point, except a little bit different, right? And so instead of location, 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 the thing that gives our boys a sense of value and helps them maintain it during rough times, and rough times, are coming in different stages, like up and coming adolescence and all that, is not location, location, location. It's connection, connection, connection. So I want us to keep that in mind. We're talking about the inner life of boys. We're talking about how can we be tuning in a way that we understand their kind of understand them on the inside. Okay, so let's take a look at what in point 3 on your outline is the road not taking, turning boys away from their inner life. It's not something we mean to do. We do it inadvertently, but it happens in epidemic proportions. A great book, by the way, on the topic is called Raising Cain. Raising Cain, cute, really creative name. Good book, Raising Cain. Um, and um, and so this idea of how is it that we end up sort of missing this part and turning boys away from the inner life? The concept that I want to share is just in a little phrase called emotional literacy. If we moved into helping a certain neighborhood that had low literacy rates in reading and writing, we'd figure out what are the needs, how do we help children read so they're more literate with books. Well, we put that in emotional terms. Typically, boys are known to be relatively emotionally like illiterate. They need help with literacy. Interesting in raising girls very often, and any teachers out there that know that you have girls in the class and boys in the class, typically girls are known to be, more emotionally literate, more empathetic, more like they keep context in mind and tune into other people. Boys, not so much. And so this literacy problem among boys. So the idea of emotional literacy would be a training and education mindset. How are we approaching our kids? How do we respond if right up to the top of the list, job one, job two, right up there in our job with our boys is, do we have our sons in a emotional literacy program? Do we understand that enough to respond to all their sort of spazzy activity in a way that by the end of the day, end of the week, end of the month, end of the year, end of when we send them off to college, all these upcoming, all these days that turn into years, have we connected them to emotional literacy? So this would be, emotional literacy would be the ability to read and understand their own emotions and those of others. So self-awareness and ability to empathize. Self-awareness, ability to empathize. We keep this in mind even for us dads as men. The plight of the American male is we tend to have low awareness and not so great at empathy. We tend to get in our head a lot. We want to fix it. We want to just be moving, get over it, get past it. And yet this is dangerous because we might accidentally keep a certain illiteracy going from generation to generation, among the male gender. So this emotional literacy. Girls are often encouraged to be emotionally literate, encouraged and kind of validated for processing their emotions out loud. Boys, not so much. And so what will this emotional training include? So we want to just mention a couple things. Number one is we want to identify and label or name emotions. Boys are going to present with whatever emotional reaction they show up with. Our job in this literacy program is to help to use words little by little over time to, when they present with an aggressive response, that we are actually going beyond the presenting version that they use, realizing there's something underneath it. We can't wait for them to figure it out because they won't figure it out on their own. So we might name and label emotion. They present with their reaction, and we might say, hey, sweetie, wow, I could see that you're really disappointed that we've got to turn the game off. Now, they may not have used the word disappointed. They may not use that word disappointed for the next 5 years straight. But in the literacy program, we're planting seeds and we're introducing them, because otherwise they would have just taken it as, I'm mad, that's the only emotion I'm having, when in actuality, they're having disappointment about the ending of the game and expressing it through anger. So emotional literacy is helping them get in touch with, how do I use words to label my emotions so that the time does come in this training approach where sometime down the road, it won't be the next time, but sometime down the road, they're going to go, oh, I can't believe it, I'm so disappointed that I have to stop, or whatever it is. And parenting job, when they start using those primary labels, sad and disappointed and upset and confused and hurt, they have to be trained to use those words because that's what they're feeling on the inside. So we're identifying, naming, labeling emotions. Number two, we recognize the emotional content that they're presenting with, both verbal and nonverbal. In simple terms, I'd say listen for emotional content. They're going to present with all kinds of reactive descriptions of how lame something is, or how it should be, or how it shouldn't apply to them, or how it's never their fault. All those things are going to be flying out of them. We're listening for emotional content. We're tuning into, ooh, I could see you're feeling X because of Y. And I know that sounds a little formulaic. We'll kind of get, we'll develop it as time permits, but the core skill there is the child who feels like their emotion was listened to comes down a few notches. Now, the problem with boys is when they're expressing what they're feeling, they typically do it in a sense through their misbehavior, or through their reactiveness, or through their aggression, and through their anger. So any chance for them to be listened to emotionally is not very high percentage, because we do what sort of instinct, or what even logic tells us, and that is we go and correct the expression, which needs to be done, but not at the expense of tuning into what they actually feel. We know in human relationships anyway that the more important the feeling, the more worked up we get. The skilled relationship, and hopefully that can apply to you and I, the skilled relationship is that we're not reacting to that presenting version that they're coming at us with, but that somewhere in our response, and I believe our initial response is the listening behavior. Then we can get to correcting that they yelled something, or correcting that they were so angry that they did, said it a certain way. We can get to that. It'd be my feeling that listening for emotional content is the first job. If they're expressing, it makes them the talker, makes us the listener. Listening for emotional content will help in this emotional literacy. It will help them evolve into understanding they have some valid feeling. And any of us, when we get validated for what we're feeling, then we are open to getting corrected on how we did it, and not out of order. And then thirdly, just understanding situation and reactions that produce emotional states. Boys are highly tuned into their environment when it comes to peers, and so we want to keep that in mind. Boys just don't like to be embarrassed, and so we want to keep that in mind in our approach. But any nuance of understanding what kind of reactions and emotional states is my child experiencing? What do I know about them that really sets them off? So I have some intelligence around what might have some deeper meaning to them. So sending our boys from childhood into adolescence with some emotional literacy to meet the challenges of what's out there, and it's not easy stuff out there. So I want us to move actually on this subject of negative emotions. I just alluded to it. And negative, so if we can picture all emotions on a football field spread out over 100 yards, and the 50-yard line, we'd say we just walked through the first 50 yards saying positive emotions, second 50 yards is negative emotions. I think we tend to do okay with positive emotions with our kids. It's in that second 50 yards of negative emotions that we tend to have. I don't know that we're all that great in responding to negative emotions or having our own negative emotions. So I just wanted just to say, and I kind of modeled it a minute ago when we were talking about labeling emotions and listening for emotional content. But very simply, I'd say in the world of negative emotions, and certainly with our boys, this is true, true, true. Negative emotions come in two forms, primary and secondary. Primary negative emotions would be things like fear, hurt, sadness, confusion, disappointment. Secondary negative emotions, so that was primary I just talked about. Secondary negative emotions, mad, frustrated, rageful. And what boys present with typically is, I'm sad, so I act angry. I'm hurt, so I act angry. I'm afraid, I act angry. I'm angry, I act angry. And then we're dealing with who this kid takes after your side. We're dealing with, wow, where is all this coming from? And yet what's happening is, and part of this literacy program and part of understanding negative emotions is very often boys will present with the secondary negative emotion, and we're trying to tune them into the primary negative emotion underneath it. The secondary negative emotion is the rock. And under the rock, we have to look under the rock and see the little bugs underneath. And those are the little primary feelings of them feeling afraid or feeling insecure. So in the world of the inner life, what we're doing with negative emotions really matters. Now, I do want to say how we use our negative emotions is a big deal, because we might have primary negative emotions that go on, but they may get expressed in secondary ways. One of the clinchers on that is, I mean, welcome to the world of parenting. What negative emotion is common to all of us? Fear. We come by it honestly. Oh, there's reasons why we wake up in the middle of the night, worried about our kids or what's going on and all that. And yet fear often leads to control. Fear often leads to anger. And so if we're not careful, we want to be aware of what are we modeling around these negative emotions. Can we model primary negative emotions around the home? Can we say to one another? Can we do it in our marriages? Hey, sweetie, I was feeling actually a little bit, hurt. Sorry about the way I snapped back at you. Can we model that around the house? Because we need to be training our boys, but a lot of that's going to get modeled one way or the other. So what do we model? How do we use these negative emotions? If we can have a visual, going to our next point, it would be like using a stethoscope. Emotional stethoscope. Invisible emotional stethoscope. And the idea is when we go to the doctor, I've never gone to a doctor where they put the stethoscope up to my mouth. I mean, they want to hear what I have to say, but they're busy tuning into the heartbeat. With our boys, they have a lot to say. And yet if we take them too literally, if we react too much to attitude, if we kind of get off track and get too attached to their manner, then their aggressiveness turns into our aggressiveness. That's why boys are so often a lightning rod for harsh punishment, is they present with all the loud, ruckus, sort of even inappropriate manner, and if their defect brings out our defect, hello, whoa, help us, that's tough. And yet with the stethoscope, they may even present with some of that stuff, but we're not putting the stethoscope to their mouth. We're putting it to the heart. We're listening for the heartbeat. And that's what I was saying earlier about that little thing that sounds formulaic, but the bare essence of it is, sweetie, it sounds like you feel X because of Y. We're tuning in. The child who feels listened to will calm down. All right, so this takes us right into sort of mentor mentality. And that's a style that I'm absolutely, and this is conventional wisdom, I think we'd all agree, but this idea of mentoring, this idea of coming alongside them, how we talked about boys having a sense of they perceive love as time or play. This fits right into the whole mentor thing. Mentors are not judgmental. Mentors are not reactive. Mentors actually, now check this out, like leave their own frame of reference and enter into the frame of reference of the son, the boy, their world. So we want to be aware of, wow, what does that mean to them, whether it's that certain friend or hanging out where they hang out or getting to school early to play basketball because they want to get picked to be on the team, and that matters more than science because to them it matters more than science. And that we not sort of judge that, but that we get a sense of, wow, that stuff matters. Ooh, they want to have a sense of belonging. That really matters. Entering their frame of reference. I actually call it, when I give marriage seminars, I call it the journey of love. And the journey of love is something that unfortunately doesn't happen a lot in people's marriages, and that is, can I leave my own point of view? Am I secure enough to leave my own point of view? Travel over to your point of view, and when I get over there, not rearrange the furniture. When I get over there, actually go, this is how I could see I could see from over here how it looks to you. I could see how it feels for you. I get that. See that leaving the frame of reference and getting what the other person is experiencing. That is what I hope to be like an emotional lifestyle in our relationships. In one's own spirituality, in our own tradition as Greek Orthodox, we could say what sets apart Orthodoxy from any other world religion You have different uh, traditions out there where you sort of have to go find God. Even architecturally, we know that spires are built because there's a sense of man reaching God, and yet in our tradition there's the dome because means the theology of the incarnation of, oh, God came down to us. God left his frame of reference, came where we are, and actually didn't judge it, but tuned in a way where we sensed some kind of love and acceptance. There's a parenting model to that. There's a parenting model. So we keep that in mind too, because we're trying to raise our kids, in the church and understanding God, but we want to make sure our parenting style is reflective of that incarnational frame of reference. Wow, journey of love. Wow, you love me enough to come where I am and get a sense of what's important to me and what I'm feeling or what I'm going through. And so we want to stay open to what's that mean. Very often, well, I would say, kind of therapeutic point, how often do I leave my frame of reference? Is my tendency to get along with people when they see it my way? This happens in family life. We tend to have bonding with the children that are most compliant, or bonding with the children that are most like us. And then what do we do about the one that's not like us? And yet that's where the real love has to become real love, where we leave our frame of reference and get to know what they're going through. So, scooting right along, let me just conclude here with a little bit of content on communication, and then we're going to take some questions, and I've got a few here that came my way. But we're seeing that our boys really do need this emotional training, this literacy. We do see that how we respond to them really does give us opportunity to do the training. We actually do the emotional training in our responses to them. We also know that when a boy feels understood, then they tend to open up more, and boys are not known to want to communicate a lot. And yet when they feel like we can be the go-to person, that where a lot of listening happens, a lot of understanding happens, they will communicate more. So in this whole subject of communication, I would say that communication, how we do it, has the power to connect or disconnect us. Remember earlier I was talking about the property value principle, where location, 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 and then for our children, what really is going to make it work is a sense of connection, connection, connection. We can organize our parenting around, what am I doing, how am I doing it? Well, how does it affect connection? What's it doing to connection? Do I rally back and make sure we're still connected? So communication now, here in the closing points, communication has the power to connect or disconnect. I think this is true in our marriages too. You're married long enough, and sometimes we think, oh yeah, whatever, I could talk however I feel like it, and yet inadvertently we might be disconnecting our partner from us in how we communicate. So when we think about how we communicate with our kids, hopefully you've been paying attention on what doesn't work. I'm a big fan. If I'm trying to figure out what to do, I love to get clear on what doesn't work. I start there. Let me just not repeat the thing that doesn't work. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over but expecting different results. And so what's not working in the communication with our kids, especially with our boys, when they look at us like, they don't even get what we're saying, and yet we tend to hammer away with the same stuff. So what's not working? I'd call that our communication killers. I want to just review a few communication killers, a few cultivators, and then look at a few questions. Communication killer number one is what I call lecture mentality. Lecture mentality is based on the premise that the longer I talk, the more they will listen. Okay, it's the big downfall of family meetings. So lecture mentality, and very often, usually with lecture mentality, we're burning with a topic that is important, and legitimately it is, and yet, bam, usually triggers a fear or something like that, and away we go. And we just steamroll, and it's a communication killer. Number two, problem-centered communication. This is really true in the life of boys. Problem-centered communication would be the times I do talk to my son is more often centered around crisis, conflict, or correction, kind of the principal office mode, being sent with the little pass, knowing no good thing's going to happen in this conversation. Very often, boys eventually end up in that kind of mode with mom and dad. So that problem-centered communication, does most of our communication happen around some kind of little correction or problem. Communication killer number 3, transference. Little psychological point there, but beware because it shows up in our communication. Communication killer number 3 would be, are my talks to my son driven out of my own unresolved stuff or out of my own fears? It's going to happen. It's going to come up for us, but is our mode of talking to them done with an intensity that will go over their head and that we need to really get out? So we want to keep that transference in mind. Number 4, make up for lost time mentality. Communication killer number 4 is, let's have 13 years worth of talks that we didn't have in an intense late night talk the night before the prom. Trying to fit it all in. We've got to find a pace. Where do we start? We want to establish some kind of this communication. What's our starting point today? And number 5, final communication killer, anger-driven communication. Anger-driven communication is when my parental communication and my parental decisions are made at the peak of my anger. Usually, I'm mad enough to do parenting. And so often our responses are reactive, our consequences are unrealistic, we can't even, really send them off for that many years or take away something for a whole year or whatever. And then so then we kind of go strike 1, strike 2. Strike 1 is we did it in reactive, and strike 2 is we don't follow through. So we want to be careful of anger-driven communication. Let me wrap up the content just with communication cultivators with our boys. Number 1, 5-to-1 ratio. 5-to-1 ratio. I stole this from Dr. John Gottman out of the University of Washington. He's known for the only guy, he's known for marriage work. Psychologist, done all these studies, and he's the only guy that's known for scientific studies on marriage. When I heard scientific studies on marriage, what makes him a scientific study on marriage versus all the other marriage studies? He's the only guy that has studied the same couples for 25 years. So he's the only guy who's done a longitudinal study on couples and came up with data after studying those couples for all those years. One of the data points he came up with is the couples that actually like each other had a communication pattern of 5-to-1 communication, 5 positive for every 1 negative in marriage. Ooh. Do the math, run home, start working on it. But I just snagged that saying, oh, our boys the cement's not dry yet. What kind of communication do we have? And can we keep in mind a ratio of 5-to-1 or more positive than negative? Okay, so that's communication cultivator, more positive than negative, 5-to-1 ratio. Number 2 is what I call shock therapy, but just joking a little bit, getting back to what we talked about before, that active listening. Really tuning in. Listening first. Stethoscope. Oh, I get you're feeling this because of this. Resisting the temptation of going on with some kind of commentary of, if you just went to church more, you wouldn't have these problems. But we back it up to listening. Oh, I hear that this is going on for you. That must really be stressful for you. That kind of active listening. And then, as we've alluded to, what I just call communication cultivator number 3 is just kind of wide open, is agenda-free time together. Whatever we could do with our boys that is agenda-free time, then the quality things happen in the context of throwing the ball, of playing ping pong, of doing a little even off-site where it's a little time once every year that dad and son go off, and then another time mom and son go off, or these like mix and match on things that make it special, little traditions that say, wow, you're worth it, and then within that fun time, the bonding and the talking happen. So let me just hold on that note right there. I want to just respond to questions. Do dads have more say in limits and consequences in teenage years, or does mom still have some influence? Great question. I would say whatever happens in teenage years is going to just be an outgrowth of what you're doing for the first 14 years. Hopefully, mom and dad will be having some kind of access, both of them, because boys need to experience limit setting from mom and from dad. Boys experience it very differently. They'll act differently in mom's limit setting and dad's limit setting. And yet we want to try to keep working on them experiencing both kinds of limit setting. And again, we want to be careful that it's not one parent being more emotionally reactive and the other parent, doing it in a severely different way. That's why we want to get back to the principle of we're going to come alongside you, we want to show empathy, but wherever you cross the line, we're going to take action. Okay, so I don't know that I would say dads should have more say in the teenage years. I would say, though, that typically the dilemma is either good. We want to stay away from good cop, bad cop, and that is that one parent is like the one who does all the disciplining and the other one doesn't. That we want to be careful of. We don't want discipline and testing of limits to rally around who's more permissive or not, based on the personality of mom or dad. We want to establish a principle that says, oh, we could have a real easygoing personality that one parent may have, another parent may be more intense. Okay, well, personalities are personalities. But that the principle is, oh, but you crossed this line, and we respond to the line that got crossed, and we instruct and have a consequence, a natural consequence, not an angry one. Let's not have our consequences be our anger. They won't learn anything. Okay? All right. Oh, I did have a question earlier about the addictive personality. Keep in mind that boys are very externally driven. They're very visual. They're very activity oriented. They're very touchy. They're very wrestly, all that kind of stuff. And because boys tend to want to sort of block out what they feel, they usually don't look at the answer to their life coming from the inside. They tend to look at the answers in life coming from the outside. The basic notion of an addictive cycle is whenever we go to an outside source to solve an inward problem. Whenever we want to feel good, we're not feeling good in here. A boy typically doesn't go in here to fix it. He wants to go out there and fix it, which means they tend to have this more addictive, once they get into something, they go hog wild. But as the more serious examples come up, they're more prone to sort of solving their emotional distress through self-medicating. Studies are showing that boys aren't just partying for social reasons, they're partying for emotional reasons. Whereas girls can have a good talk with their best friends and feel better, boys typically won't choose that route, and they're more prone to then going quick fix with some substance or some activity. And that activity can turn into sexual activity, can turn into drinking activity, smoking, and all the rest. And so we see that this journey of trying to introducing them to their inner life is going to be paying off for them, so that when real life stuff is happening along the way, they have a little bit more of a path to themselves. The more blocked it is, the more outward they go. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Let's see, there's a lot. Oh gosh, I'm not a fast reader. So definitely a lot of the foundation does apply. The question was, does the points we've covered cover for both boys and girls today? I'd say yes, definitely foundationally this is like what I'd say is sensible parenting stuff. I would say the nuance of how we connect with our boys, how we come alongside our boys, how we don't fall into this lightning rod problem of getting too reactive to what we can expect to be their reactions. We want to be particularly tuned into that with our boys, because it's going to be such a common occurrence. Okay, let's see. Okay, I know that some other religious believe that the children can somehow adopt responsibility, or I'm not reading this right. Something prior, past bad behavior. What is Orthodox perspective? Oh, I don't know if we're talking about, if the question is sort of generationally. Let me comment on how I'm hearing it, maybe. That my understanding of Orthodox teaching is that uh, the psyche of a person can be passed on generationally. I might be all washed out on that, but my understanding is, and I'd say from experience, I find not only environmental factors really important in the raising of boys, absolutely, but I do think that things can show up in family life that somehow is in the generations of a family. And I do believe both emotionally and spiritually we want to be sober-minded. Why we want to almost redeem what's going on in our family life with responses that bring this kind of love and understanding and this bringing down of the reactiveness, this reaching the heart of the child is really going to almost like change maybe the course of the family legacy, emotionally speaking. No, I think we're right at 11:30, so I don't know if at this point we need to wrap. I have one question that just came in. Do grandparents, Yaya or Papu, set limits or just easygoing as a non-judging encounter? I would definitely say extended family overall need to be the supportive stethoscope type of, hey, sweetie, I could see what you're feeling. I'd say 99% is make sure that the emotional support is there. However, and I'm seeing this whenever I make it into church, I think limit setting is becoming a problem among us Greeks. I don't know about other people out there. So there is a trend. If we grew up with sort of strict parents, we can err on the side of being too permissive. And so all this good touchy-feely stuff I've hopefully been talking about, I don't want it to be mixed up with permissive parenting. I want us to end it. Let me conclude on this point, and I'll hand it over to Melissa, and we can decide on what we're doing with time. But let me end on this point that absolutely that this tuning into stethoscope, this let me get my child, let me be emotionally literate, let me be emotionally intelligent, let me have a parenting style that is really getting my child in a way that they get that I went over to where they are and feel for what they feel. As I do it, that is in no way to communicate that we're to have really fuzzy limits. The idea is we could have very clear limits. When they cross it, we can respond. But the idea is when we respond, A, we're not reactive, and B, we're going to be consistent in, oh, no, remember that line's not okay. Let's come back this way. This is what's going to happen. But that we're consistent with the limit setting, but that we have this whole other side of the coin, which is this empathetic connection with, ooh, I get how fun that is, or, oh, I hear you, I know you want to do that, but come on, let's do this. That we really have this combination, and I'll conclude it with this. The no trespassing sign is in big letters. In small letters, it says violators will be prosecuted. Very often, our boys hear the big letters of our words. Yep, blah, 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 but we don't have the follow-through to say, no, we really are serious about this. This is not okay. The follow-through is what we need to be attentive to. Now, I think grandparents and extended family can be in on the program of, nope, we know that mom and dad said no about that, but they don't have to be the heavy enforcer, but they're going to keep watch of the basic lines. And within those lines, extended family is meant to be kind of a very loving, playful, approachable, relationships. But let's keep in mind both sides of that coin. Of the empathy approach is what teaches the literacy that they need emotionally, and then the setting of the limit is going to let them know they can flex all they want. We love it when they flex. It's just that when they flex and take it over the line, this is what occurs, and we bring them back to center again. So on that note, I'll hand it over to Melissa.
Thank you, George. That was amazing. As a mother of a 4-year-old boy, I really took a lot from that. So I really thank you for that. And I also want to thank Leadership 100. Leadership 100 is constantly, generously giving to our ministry to allow us to give programs like this for you, the faithful, to listen into. Next month, we have with us Father Charles Joannides, who is a researcher, and his area of interest is working with intermarried couples. And so the topic is reaching distantly connected intermarried couples and their families and how to bring them into the life of the church. So that should be a great topic next month, and that will be on Tuesday, June 24th at 1:30. Again, this will be put up on our website in about a week or within the week, and we will post it on our Facebook page once it is up, as well as emailing it out to on our listserv. You can like us on Facebook and join our listserv by going to family.goarch.org, and you can sign up that way. Thank you so much. Again, thank you, George. We look forward to hearing more from you, hopefully.
Thanks. Take care.